Sometimes when I read the stories of saints, great saints in our tradition, it can sometimes become a little discouraged because I read about these saints who do these tremendous things with their life, who leave, who go to far-off places, who labor tirelessly for the building up of the church, the kingdom, who do all these great feats, who are movers and shakers of history. And sometimes it can be discouraging to look at all these great feats they do and then, wonder, well, how do I fit into all of this? But there was another saint who also admired the great saints in our tradition. Her name was Saint Therese of Lisieux. She very much desired to live a life of a great saint. She would read about these missionaries, these people who, as I said, went to far-off places, who did all these things, and she herself had a desire to do all these great things. But how did her life unfold? Well, she grew up in a little town, a small village in France, and essentially never left. Ended up joining a convent there, a cloistered convent. She didn't leave. And she died at a young age. Never, at least from worldly perspective, never seemingly to have accomplished any great feats. And her name is Saint Therese of the little town of Lisieux, France. But in her spiritual reflections, she reflected on this very desire, her desire to accomplish great things for the Lord. And she began to reflect on the idea of flowers. She's reflecting on these great saints. She said, the Lord showed to me this idea of that I saw that every flower that he has created has a beauty of its own. That the splendor of the rose and the lily's whiteness do not deprive the little violet of its scent, nor make less ravishing the daisy's charm. I saw that if every flower wished to be a rose, nature would lose her spring adornments, and the fields would no longer be enameled with their varied flowers. So it is in the world of souls, the living garden of the Lord. It pleased him to create great saints who may be compared with the lilies or the rose. But he also created little ones who must be content to be daisies or violets, nestling at his feet to delight his eyes when he should choose to look at them. What delights him is the simplicity of these flowers of the field. And by stooping so low to them, he should show how infinitely great he is. Just as the sun shines equally on the great cedar tree and the little flower, so the divine sun shines equally on everyone, great and small. And so she later became nicknamed Saint Therese the Little Flower, precisely because she saw herself as one of these little flowers, that she wasn't one of these great saints, a great rose or lily, but a little flower. But rather than being a discouragement to her, she saw that precisely as the way that God had called her to be. I am but a little flower in the field, she says, and so I will be the best little flower that I can be. And stop trying to be a rose or a lily, but simply be a little wood violet, but a wood violet to the fullest, to the delight of the Lord. So from this, she developed what she called the little way of love. First of all, as I said, how she recognized that God is at work even in our littleness, our smallness and our weakness. Even there, the Lord is at work. And so from that too, then, really, you could say it's not about the greatness of the tasks we do, but the greatness of love with which they're done. That essentially is her little way. She goes on to write, "You know well enough that our Lord does not look so much at the greatness of our actions, nor even at their difficulty, but at the love with which we do them. Miss no single opportunity of making some small sacrifice, here by a smiling look, there by a kindly word, always doing the smallest right and doing it all for love. For the least act of pure love is of more value than all the other works put together. So St. Therese saw it was through this little way of love was the way to change the world. But again, as we look at her life, it may seem like her words, she didn't do much as far as worldly standards. But yet her writings became very influential and became distributed. Her little reflections, that she probably thought only a few people would ever read, became widely distributed and very influential throughout the world, to the point that the church named St. Therese a doctor of the church, a title given to one not as a medical doctor, but saints whose teachings are so influential and so transformative in the life and thinking of the church that they're given this honorific title as a great teacher of the faith. And so, too, her words were very impactful, and a particular nun who decided to take her religious name after St. Therese of Lisieux, Therese being the French form of Teresa. And so there was this nun who read Therese's works and was so inspired, she took the name Teresa for herself. And inspired by this little way of love, began to form her own missionary movement that came to be known as the Missionaries of Charity. And this Teresa, this Sister Teresa, became Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And you can see much of Therese's little way in the very words of Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta herself. How she talked about doing every little thing with great love. And she herself, Mother Teresa, is quoted as saying very similar things. It's not so much the greatness of the things we do, but the greatness of the love we do them with. And of course, as we look at Mother Teresa and her community, we can see how they truly did begin to transform the world in caring for the poorest of the poor. And so as we reflect, as is held up to us in the gospel today, this poor widow who gave out her smallness, her littleness, that in a worldly standards seems worth less. The Lord teaches us, reminds us today, that it is in fact not worth less. But in fact, those small acts, those hidden acts of great love, even if they seem small in worldly standards, are worth so much, are full of worth to the Lord. Reminding us to, whatever we find ourselves great and small, to do every little thing with great love. It can be easy to think, as we live in a small rural town in Iowa, to think that, we're away from the big things of the world or whatnot. But it's to recognize that God is at work right here, in the small, in the day-to-day. There's the old expression, the devil is in the details. We might add to that, the divine is in the details as well. It's not as much about the great tasks we do, but the good things we do with great love. And so in our perceived littleness, to recognize even there, God is at work. And what we perceive as the smallness of our lives, there God is at work and calls us to do them. To be, whether we're a flower great and small in the field of the Lord, to be that to the fullest. And as we see with Therese of Lisieux, this girl who never left her small little hometown of Lisieux, a small little village in France, and who wrote her reflections not expecting to have any great impact in the world, and yet her being the little flower to the fullest did in fact transform the world, has affected so many minds and hearts to know the love of the Lord in their life, inspiring them to greater love in the world, including to inspire the movement of the Missionaries of Charity, founded by Mother Teresa of Calcutta. That her being a little flower to the fullest did transform the world. We may not see the fullness effects of our life in our own life, but God does. And it can leave ripple effects that leave far after our life when we love in such a way. A final thought. along those lines. As I tend to, in my line of work, do a number of funerals, often struck by, of course, when people talk about their parents, reflect on, very little is it about their great success in their career. Every once in a while, yes, but it's usually even that a passing remark. But it's the love they knew and experienced in them. That's what has the enduring and lasting impact. That's what has the ripple effects in the world. So let us, inspired by the poor widow, by people like Therese of Lisieux, live this little way of love, allowing God to work in our littleness and doing every little thing with fullness and greatness of love. Sometimes when I read the stories of saints, great saints in our tradition, can sometimes